At the Economic Alliance, our mission is to drive economic, workforce, and population growth strategies, and to help businesses succeed. Join the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance and learn more about our work at cedarrapids.org.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Civic Engagement in Iowa. My name is Craig Jamolis. I'm the retired managing editor of the Gazette newspaper in Cedar Rapids. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to do a couple things. One is to thank our sponsors. Our longtime sponsor, ITC Midwest of Iowa Ideas, is the presenting sponsor, and this particular session is brought to us by the Metro Economic Alliance. Both are based in Cedar Rapids. And because of their support, Iowa Ideas continues to be free for everybody to participate in. So thank you very much. The second thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the topic of our session. I know that when people looked at the schedule, they saw that it was talking about community engagement and getting new voices involved in community conversations. We're going to take a step back from that and talk about civic engagement, which is really the precursor to community engagement. And so to get started on that, let me introduce our panelists who are going to bring us through this conversation. Karen Kudrowski is the director of the Carrie Chapman Cat Center for Women in Politics at Iowa State University. She's a political science professor and co-director of the new Center for Cyclone Civics in Ames. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Craig. It's great to be here.
Allison Rank is the founding director of the brand new Center for Civic Education at the University of Northern Iowa, and she began just a few months ago. Welcome to Iowa.
Thank you.
She is a political science professor at UNI and used to be chair of the Department of Politics at the State University of New York at Oswego. Welcome to Iowa. And Joseph Gittler is the Wiley B. Rutledge Professor of Law at the University of Iowa. And she was the founder of the nonprofit Alliance for Civic Education in Iowa. And she also drafted a proposal that later became an Iowa law, which is going into effect now, requiring high school students to pass civics test in order to graduate. So welcome, everybody, to our Iowa Ideas session today. I'm going to start our conversation by turning to Josephine, because I see, UI law professor who specializes in healthcare policy and civic education. I wonder if you could connect the dots about how a law professor gets involved in civic education and what motivated you to form this nonprofit, and secondly, what's it doing?
Well, thank you, Craig. What motivated me was a concern that was demonstrated by a great number of recent surveys and polls that revealed that many Americans lack what I would call the most basic knowledge and skills needed to carry out their duties and responsibilities as citizens. Can I give you just an example?
Yes, please.
As illustrative, 36% of adults surveyed in one very reputable survey of the national nature could not name all three branches of government. They could not even name that we have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. And let me just give you one other example. 88% of eighth graders scored below proficient level on the National Civics Assessment exam, and 76% scored below proficient level on the National History Assessment exam. And so, how can we have the citizens who understand their basic duties and responsibilities if they lack basic knowledge with respect to American government and American history and the importance of their responsibilities and as citizens?
You're referring to the Annenberg Center study at the University of Pennsylvania that talked about the three branches of government and our lack of knowledge of that as well. I noticed also one of the studies also posted on the website for the Alliance for Civic Education talks about how a great portion of people, respondents, could not name who's the president of the U.S. Senate, could not name who the Speaker of the U.S. House is, could not name the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. However, did know 89% of the respondents knew that Amazon is owned by Jeff Bezos. So you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that. But which brings me to my next question. I'll probably turn to Karen for this here, but I would like to hear everybody's perspective as well. I just can't help but think back to way back when I was in junior high school, back when the dinosaurs walked the earth, way back when went to school. Personal calculators were just making their appearance then. I remember in 7th grade that we would be faced with a math problem and we just type it into our calculator and the answer would pop up. But there was a great deal of just content at the time about kids these days are not learning how to do long division. There's a calculator that does that for them. And so this knowledge will be lost forever. Now I flash forward to today when I hear these appalling statistics about how we apparently don't know any kind of civic knowledge. But we live in the area, to use the paraphrase, there are no questions anymore. There's only answers, and the answer starts with Google. So if I want to know what the Bill of Rights is, I just type it in the internet, and AI pops up with an answer which may or may not be right. So, Karen, let me turn to you. When we look at this lack of civic knowledge we have, what difference does it make in our culture? Why is it important? Why does anybody care? If I want to know something, I'll just look it up and it would tell me the answer.
Well, it's important for several reasons. Number one is that whatever answer might be generated from your searches on the internet might not be factually correct, right? Or might be dated information. And also, I think it's important to have kind of an intuitive and built-in understanding of, civic literacy, the kind of things that Josephine was talking about here, because that does, in fact, shore up our commitment to democracy. And you can't really understand what is happening in the country or how to influence public policy with your local or regional or state legislators unless you really understand how government works, right? Because it's there to serve the people and to problem solve for individuals, but you have to know who to ask and how to ask. So that's, I think, very important. And today, when I really think that there are some challenges to the constitutional powers that are outlined in the Constitution, it's very important for people to understand that what is going on today is not necessarily what the founders had envisioned, and that we need to think carefully about whether or not we want to stay on this path and do that collectively as a country.
Elson or Josephine, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think when you're sort of asking about the kind of transition in technology, right? And it's sort of, well, we have a way to get this information now that just means we maybe don't need it in our heads all the time. I think Karen gave a really good explanation as to why that doesn't quite work. But I also think it's important to think about how that shift in institutional context is actually a big part of how we've ended up with a lack of civic knowledge, because I think understanding that context can be key to how we think about civic education moving forward. And so one of the pieces as a political scientist I really like on this is from a political communication scholar named Marcus Pryor, who basically looked at political knowledge surveys and mapped them onto the way that political knowledge grew as we moved into a broadcast system where there were 3 news stations on television and everybody got the news at the exact same time off their broadcast TV. And the choice was watch the news or turn off your television. And Americans don't turn the television off. And political knowledge then started declining again on surveys as soon as cable was introduced. And there was an option for keeping your television on, but not keeping it on the news. And so I think it's both the kind of like the internet and the ability to access that information in a way where maybe we don't feel like we need it on the top of our heads all the time. But it's also the case that individuals were just getting that information because of the media landscape that we lived in. It wasn't necessarily sort of intentionally picking up. It was almost an unintended consequence, potentially, in some of the media environment that we were in. And I think we have to think about that as well when we're thinking about civic education.
Can I add?
Yes, please.
There's no more, I think, important responsibility of us as American citizens than voting. And the internet doesn't vote. It's we that vote. Obviously, the internet can inform us to be responsible voters, but it's our responsibility to educate ourselves, to vote. And I think we need to always keep that in mind when we're talking about this subject.
You know, Allison, I was going to pick up a little bit on what you just said. When I see survey results like the Annenberg thing, where a third of the people couldn't name all 3 branches of government. Some can name 2 or 1, but a third of them could not name all of them. I find that appalling. But at the same time, I also think back to the stories you see every once in a while about how you'll see a story about 2/3 of 11th graders couldn't find India on a map. And I find that appalling. But at the same time, I think to myself, well, could 2/3 of 11th graders ever find India on the map? Is that worse or better than it used to be? What I was going to ask you is, and other people could weigh in on this as well, was there ever a time when our knowledge of civics was better than it is now? And I wonder if you could elaborate on that some more about what is there a decline of knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a decline. I think the thing that's actually one of the things that gets interesting about this is that it's both a decline and it's a bifurcation. So there's a decline overall in terms of what people know. But then if you look at individuals who intentionally pay attention to politics, there is a fire hose of information available. And so for folks who intentionally pay attention, you can honestly get more and more and more information than you ever had access to before. But if you're a person who intentionally doesn't pay attention, it is possible to structure your life so that you almost never encounter political information. And so it's both kind of, if you look at both groups at the same time, absolutely there's a decline in political knowledge, but there's also this incredible split between individuals who pay an extreme amount of attention and individuals who pay no kind of intentional attention.
Well, as a result, partly because of this lack of knowledge, Iowa has been really ramping up its civic education, both at the high school level and at the college level. Let me talk originally first about the college level. And Karen, let me ask you this, and this applies to Allison as well. The Iowa State and UNI are both launching civics centers. One at Iowa State has been running a little bit longer. The one at UNI is just like brand new. Karen, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about what goes on at the center. What is this mission, and who are the students, and what do they learn?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So both the UNI Center and the Iowa State Center have their origins in the Board of Regents directives from November of 2023. And a number of those directives had to do with dismantling any diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on the 3 Regents universities, but then also directed the universities to start thinking about how to have a campus-wide civic education and free speech initiative. So we met for that following summer in 2024, and the group of us that came together really decided that what we wanted to do here at Iowa State is sort of a 3-pronged effort. We want to focus on civic literacy so that students do in fact know that the right to bear arms is not in the First Amendment, which is another common fallacy, right? So important factual information like that. To have the critical thinking skills necessary that when they're confronted with the barrage of information that Allison was talking about, that they can sift through it and be able to think about, what of this might be factual, what's exaggerated, what's completely made up. And then we want to foster, a civic disposition so that as they go out into the world as citizens, but also as professionals in their field, that they will be motivated to be thinking about how they can contribute, not just to their communities, which is very important, but also in terms of shaping government and shaping policy as, individual citizens through voting and service on boards and commissions, but as professionals, like through their professional associations, so that they understand how government policy has an impact on what they are doing as engineers or in the agriculture business or as teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So we are doing this through curriculum enhancements. We are doing it through grants to conduct research with faculty that are willing. We're doing a whole lot of programming over the next 3 semesters where we are focusing on America at 250, which we will be celebrating as a country in July of 2026. And we're also doing outreach through extension and trying to come up with relevant materials that they can use as they are working with people in local communities.
So the students who go to the center and take classes through the center, is that required or is it optional or is it part of a major requirement or kind of?
The center doesn't directly offer courses other than one that is being sort of piloted. And Iowa State does not have a conventional civics requirement in its general education program. So we'll be ready should one come along. But in the meantime, what we're really trying to do is to work through the existing frameworks that are there to, to tailor our messages through the majors and the colleges to get students interested from their particular disciplinary perspectives.
And Allison, is that going to be more or less the same at UNI?
So I think we have, in some ways, a little bit of a different emphasis coming just out of UNI's commitment, sort of the normal school traditionally of Iowa and our deep commitment to K-12. So when I came on board for this position in July, it's sort of laid out as having 3 really specific goals. So the center here is supposed to enhance UNI's civic engagement communities activities for both the campus and the community, really focusing on introducing diverse viewpoints and helping individuals sort of sit in and have conversations with individuals who have viewpoints that are different from theirs. Providing support on civic education, professional development for our in-service and pre-service K-12 teachers across the state of Iowa. And then the place where I think Karen and I overlap a bit more is looking at that curriculum development, curricular innovation and professional development for faculty in terms of thinking about civic education. And I know the way sort of Karen's thinking about it to some degree in the way we are, like where are the places you can find this in terms of sort of like professional applicability. One of the ways I also tend to think about it is if we look at some of those civic skills that absolutely the civic knowledge is important, but I also think I haven't had a chance to get in a classroom here in Iowa yet, but sort of being in classrooms and watching, especially coming out of COVID and the pandemic and the heightened pressures and polarization and negative partisanship, just students struggle to feel comfortable articulating their own viewpoints to each other, and then hearing a sort of like, well, I disagree with you because, and sitting in that conversation. And so I'm really interested in helping faculty think through spaces where you already ask students to do that kind of work. Maybe it's providing feedback on each other's work, right? It's not necessarily about a quote unquote political topic or even a policy that's connected to a particular professional area, but is just getting more comfortable again with the idea that you're going to put forward an affirmative statement and sit through engaging with somebody about your perspective and their perspective.
You know, you coined a phrase that I had never heard before, and maybe we should talk about some terms as well. But I think the phrase you used is civic friendliness.
Civic friendship.
Civic friendship. Could you explain what's meant by that?
Sure. I'm definitely not going to take credit. That's Aristotle. It's Aristotle's term. But I'm really interested in the kind of like civic culture and what Karen talked about in terms of civic dispositions that we want folks to have. And so Aristotle talks about this idea of civic friendship that's sort of distinct from a kind of personal friendship you have with somebody where you know them intimately, you know them personally. He sort of says, in order for a state to work, for a democracy to work, you need to have a kind of friendship that's based in mutual recognition of the other person's dignity and having some sense that your sort of future, the common good that you both share, is wrapped up in each other. And so it doesn't have to be about kind of a personal relationship, but it's a kind of friendship that's based on a respect of the fact that you're in a common enterprise with the other person. And so I really like sort of some more modern scholars, Brooke Manville and Josiah Ober, describe it as, quote, having some concern for another's good, even if they disagree on many things and seek different goals. And so having that level of a civic friendship that undergirds our politics, I think is really important.
When I asked a question early on about, what difference does it make that we don't have, enough civic knowledge? One of the things that is apparent is what the original course description was for this seminar was community engagement. And I wonder if any panelists can help bridge the gap between civic knowledge and what we learn about how government works or is supposed to work, versus being engaging in your own community. I don't know if that makes any sense, but kind of the link between civic engagement and community engagement.
Well, that's a really important question, Craig, and I will take a crack at it here. So when we talk about civic engagement, we're really talking about how citizens can be involved in a functioning democracy. And a lot of people just equate that with voting, and voting is only one component. It might be serving on boards and commissions, being involved in political parties or advocacy groups. It's the understanding that you can't approach your elected officials and ask for assistance with problems or to advocate for policy changes. It's also, serving on local boards and commissions or otherwise sort of being a poll worker. It's being engaged in helping our democracy function. Now, community engagement is being involved in a healthy community from more of from a less political perspective. So, it's coaching your kid's soccer team. It's volunteering in the PTA. It's, working with or through the nonprofit service sector, like, a food shelf or a homeless shelter, things like that. So all of that work, like that the Rotary does and so forth, is really important. And it's a huge contribution, allergies. It's a huge contribution to a healthy community, but it is not civic engagement as the way that we would understand.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up allergies because I'm having the same thing myself, and I'm having my box of Kleenex nearby. That said, obviously, the growth of the college level of civic centers, I think a common mission is also to look at the K through 12 area as well. And Josephine, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the college, or I'm sorry, high school degree requirement of passing the civics test. What caused you to advocate for that? And I'm not sure when that actually starts to take effect, whether that's this school year or if it's next school year. I just wonder if you could bring us back through to educate us a little bit more about that.
All right. Well, an important objective of ACE is to foster and facilitate civic education in K through 12 public and private schools. And our important initiative that we undertook in that regard was to bring about the enactment of legislation that requires high school seniors to pass the U.S. citizenship civics test in order to graduate. And during the last session of the legislature, the General Assembly did in fact pass that legislation, which I initially drafted on behalf of ACE, and the Governor Reynolds signed it into law in May. The U.S. citizenship civics test contains basic questions about American government and American history. It is the test that legal immigrants here in the United States have to pass to become citizens. And so should not American citizens who graduate from high school know what legal immigrants have to know in order to become citizens? The questions are basic. Passage of the U.S. citizenship civics test doesn't mean that high school graduates will have the knowledge and the skills that we would like them to have to be the kind of citizens that our democratic system of government requires. But if you cannot pass that test, you certainly don't have the needed knowledge and skills. And of course, we referred before to the fact that 36% of adults surveyed in a national representative sample of adults couldn't name all three branches of government. One of the questions that has to be answered on the U.S. citizenship civics test is, what are the three branches of government?
I should note that the law, it's interesting, but high school students can take, as I understand it, high school students can take the test as many times as needed. It's not a one shot, that's it. You can take it until you pass it. And they have to get 60%, which is generally would be a D, right? I mean, it's not a high standard really to pass that. Is that correct?
That's correct. And you indicated a moment ago that you were uncertain when it became effective. Mm-hmm. It does not come into effect this academic year, but next academic year, to give the opportunity to the Department of Education here in Iowa to develop a multiple choice test that can then be sent to school districts throughout Iowa.
I was also going to give a shout out to the website for the foundation you created. It's called, I'm going to get this wrong, so let me look it up. It's ace-ia.org, Alliance for Civic Education in Iowa, if you want to look it up. It includes a sample test of a civics test, and people might be surprised, I certainly was, about how easy it is to get something wrong. The one that tripped me up was one of the questions has to do with the 13 stripes on the U.S. flag. Do they represent the 13 original colonies, 13 original states, or there's some other choice about, can't remember what it said about, they ran out of room and that's all they had room for. And for some reason, I got in my mind that it was 13 states when actually it's 13 colonies, and which I knew, but I still got it wrong.
So I would encourage people to go to the ACE website. You can Google Alliance for Civic Education of Iowa, and Google will lead you to the website and to the page that has the test that you can take to see how much you know and whether you could pass the U.S. Citizenship Civics test. It has 20 questions from the U.S. Citizenship Civics test. So I hope people will take advantage of the opportunity to take that test and see if they can pass.
I thought that was very interesting, and also has a lot of the studies you talk about posted as well. So I think that website is definitely worth looking at. Speaking of K through 12 again, still keeping with that theme. I just remember again back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth when I went to school. So much of what I learned in elementary school and junior high and high school was based on memory. I remember in 9th grade, we had to memorize the preamble of the Constitution, and that was the test question. We also had to memorize the Gettysburg Address. But it just seems like a lot of the questions on the test are really, you learn those basic facts, you memorize those facts. But increasingly, we live in an age when, you use Allison's analogy, we have a fire hose of information coming at some people. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what's real, what's not real, what's partially true, what's not partially true. So critical thinking skills, obviously, that's a big part of the college education as well. But how does that critical thinking get pushed down also to the K through 12 education as well? So people don't just memorize, here's the correct answer, but increasingly can function in a society where critical thinking skills are important.
So let me say that in K through 12 in Iowa, there are standards for social studies. Mm-hmm. And social studies does include government, and it does include history. And at ACE, we have been working with social studies teachers in K through 12 throughout the state. And that is one of the things that you've mentioned is critical thinking skills that K through 12 social studies teachers are charged with helping students learn. And, information, basic information about history and government is just a starting point for good quality civics education. There's another component, and that is the skills that are needed to be informed and responsible citizens.
The Allison, you and I is interesting here, not only for the new Civic Center, but also because of its traditional role in training students to become teachers. And obviously that's a big part of the role there as well. So when we talk about the missions for the new center, I assume that part of them is helping teach teachers or students how to become teachers.
Sure. So I will say I'm really excited about the opportunity with the new state standards and sort of thinking through the new state standards for social studies and sort of thinking through sort of knowledge, skills, and dispositions for civics and where they fit within those standards. Also say, right, we've got teachers in schools who are excelling at doing this work, right? And I think we want to learn from what it is that a set of teachers are doing as well. So as somebody who's coming in from outside the state, I am frankly really looking forward to on October 20th, I'm going to be at the Iowa Council for Social Studies meeting that's happening in Ankeny. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from social studies teachers that are sort of on the ground doing the work. Like, what is it that they're finding that works? What are the challenges they're they're having, what kind of supports would they like to have backup on that sort of I can be providing and you and I can be providing sort of out of the Center of Civic Education.
Can I add? I'm looking forward to seeing you there, Alice. I'm going to be presenting also there in the Council for Social Studies Teachers. And what I am going to be presenting is the results of the A's first Summer Fellowship Institute for Social Studies teachers. We had a wonderful group of social studies teachers from middle school and high school that we work with during the Institute, and that identify their challenges and their problems as social studies teachers, and develop some ways in which they could be addressed. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done to support social studies teachers in Iowa, again in K through 12, both public and private schools, to support them so that they can enhance civic education and engagement, both.
Josephine, I was going to ask you more about the Social Studies Institute to elaborate on that. Could you share with us kind of how do teachers participate in it? I think you have one coming up. You just got done with one. You have one coming up next year as well. How do teachers participate in this? And what are you hearing from teachers about things that they're doing that work?
Well, again, I would encourage people to go to our website and that discusses the Summer Institute, and there is an application process for teachers. We just received a grant from the Farm Bureau for our next Summer Institute that will be held in 2026, and the focus of which will be bringing together social studies teachers from rural Iowa, because that's where a lot of the critical need is to support social studies teachers in rural Iowa that oftentimes are without the resources that they need and the mentorship that they feel they could benefit from to enhance education of a civic nature in their schools.
I was going to ask all our panelists about, let's say that there's a viewer here that's interested in being more involved in learning more about civic education and engagement. Is there something that people should actually do? I know Josephine has talked about, and I have talked about going to that website and taking a sample test of the civics test and finding out what you do and don't know. But is there something else that people should be doing to get involved in this in some way, shape, or form?
Well, I will say that all the public events that we are hosting as part of our America 250 celebration are free and open to the public. So we certainly encourage people to come. And one thing that I'm very proud about is that we have an opportunity to really feature some local talent using Iowa State professors who have some interesting insight into the founders. So, for example, we have a classics professor who's going to talk about the influence of the ancient Greeks and Romans on the American founders. Allison's already mentioned Aristotle. I'm pretty sure he's going to come up again and things like that. So, that's one way to get involved. And also, the League of Women Voters in Iowa is also interested in figuring out how they can promote more civic knowledge. And they're really great with forums and candidate forums and educational opportunities, but they're also very interested in the same kind of questions that we are. How can we fill the blanks, right? Because something is going wrong in our K-12 education where people aren't coming out with the civic knowledge that they need, which is not their fault. It's not necessarily the fault of the teachers either. There's a whole lot of factors that have gone into that. So how do we get them engaged so that they can be fully informed citizens?
So I'm going to pull it back a little bit, I think, to the kind of civic virtue space with civic friendship. And I'm particularly interested, and I would encourage folks to think about how they're connected right now to civic culture. And so civic culture is defined as the norms, values, narratives, habits, and rituals that shape how we live together and govern ourselves in a democratic society. So it's kind of that underneath even the community engagement and civic engagement is that like broader, what is our civic culture? And this is something I'm paying a ton of attention to right now as somebody who just moved here, right? Like, how am I going to be involved? What are the habits I should develop? Can I understand kind of the norms and the rituals of this civic community? And I think one of the things that has happened in the last set of years that I talked about already, sort of influencing what we see on college campuses, is also in our communities, right? We all sort of spend an amount of time hunkered down. The partisanship and polarization is really sort of driving individuals to not be in community with one another. And so I'd encourage folks to think about like where are they personally right now? And is it the same place you were back in 2018 or 2019 in terms of how you contribute to a civic culture, how you're part of the civic culture in your community? And if that civic culture has atrophied, what can you do about it, right? Are there ways to sort of think about, maybe it's not clearly as civic as voting, but is it that your neighborhood should have a potluck? Have you actually had a block party in a while where you just get people together in your neighborhood and have some of those relationships? And so really thinking through some of those pieces, I think, is important.
Can I add that Karen alluded to the fact that 2026, next year, is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I think there are going to be a number of events, projects, initiatives to celebrate our 250th anniversary. And the State Historical Society is taking the lead in organizing ways to celebrate the 250th anniversary. A lot of, I think, different organizational entities are going to be holding events, conducting initiatives. And so I think next year is maybe, hopefully, a golden opportunity to get involved by participating in all of the many events which I anticipate are going to be going on.
You know, picking up on what everybody just said, I can't help but think that if you spend any time on social media at all, you find that there is no end of the blame game going back and forth, and I don't see any kind of common ground where people are saying that here's something we agree on, or checking out something before they repost it. One of the famous things going on right now is that there's all kinds of quotes flying around social media from the Pope, which things he didn't actually say. And people are reposting those. I just wonder, is there, in addition to the things you talked about the potluck, which I think is a great idea, and taking the civics test and being involved in these upcoming events, is there something to do right now for people to say, let me help set the proper political or civic climate? Something I just do something without thinking, but is there something I should do before I do those things I just do automatically, like social media posts? I wonder if anybody has any comment on that. I think all of us have experienced where we have a friendship that's frayed, and we're not quite sure what to do about that. Are there steps that, and maybe small steps, people should be taking now that would set the proper civic climate?
So I would just say there is some research coming out that essentially suggests that, like, if people, there's research on kind of the nationalization of politics, right? Like the things that are circulating on social media tend to be conflict over like national level, hot button, sort of high issues. That is very different to me. And it's slightly different than the potluck, but not that different. That conversation on social media is very different than, hey, I think this corner of our neighborhood is super dangerous and we need to figure out how to get a stop sign. Can I get 7 people in my neighborhood, even if they have political yard signs I didn't agree with in 2024, to get on board that like this isn't safe for any of our kids on their bikes and we need a stop sign? And there's actually pretty good research coming out that getting people together to do something, as opposed to getting people together to try to intentionally talk across issues they disagree on, is having like sort of really good results in terms of rebuilding people's kind of civic climate. And so I would say that to me is what is not the thing that's popping off on social media? What's the thing that in your neighborhood somebody could actually use some help, or your neighborhood could use a refurbishment of the playground, and get a group of people together to do that without paying attention to what their social media posts are and potentially setting aside what their yard signs were in 2024.
Thank you.
I would like to jump in if I could. I think Allison is exactly right. And as I think about the people that I disagree with politically, I try to remind myself that they are whole persons who live complex lives, and that there's going to be some issues on which we actually agree. And I think that, part of the partisan polarization that we have is that people end up being caricatured as one dimensional, right? If you disagree with me, you're evil, you're bad. And that's happening on both sides. And I think that we all need to sort of remind ourselves that we're all, a combination of virtues and vices, strengths and weaknesses, and that what we really need to do is to be thinking about each other as whole persons. And so that might mean that you don't interact on social media and you have a conversation, and not necessarily about politics, but about a stop sign or your garden or whatever it is. Yeah.
Obviously, I was just really embarking really in earnest on this civic education with the high school graduation requirement test and the new civic centers coming online here. I just want to get your feeling about what do you see in the future? Where's all this going? And if we do all these things, if we enhance our civic knowledge at the college level and the high school level and grade school level, what is the end result of this? Can we ever recapture that time wherein our civic knowledge was higher than it is now? Obviously, we're not going to go back to the point where we have only 3 TV stations to watch, but what is I just want to do a round robin here of our panelists. What do you think of the next, looking in the future, 15 or 20 years, where's all this going?
What I would like to see is that people have a civic disposition where they understand that their voices and actions are important to the functioning of our democracy. So that would see, increase in trust in institutions, increase in trust in our elections. And also, one of the things that we hear from our extension partners here at Iowa State University is that the leaders of our rural communities are very worried that there aren't going to be people to step in and succeed them as, local government officials. So I would like that problem to go away, where there is certainly a group of people who are willing to step in and contribute to their community through local elective office.
I think I'm kind of in a similar where Karen is, which I when you sort of asked us this question for thinking about this panel, I would like the push on civic knowledge and civic education to get us to a place where folks better understand that both conflict and compromise are actually sort of virtues and an inherently necessary part of a constitutional republic. That's what our institutions are set up to help us manage, both conflict and compromise, and that both of those are things that are going to happen and that we can have happen in a way that doesn't drive young people out of being willing to run for office, right? Doesn't make people feel like I can't even think about stepping into these kinds of public service positions because the kind of vitriol that's going to come is just not something that folks want, and that compromise is kind of off the table. So I would like it to get us to that place.
I would hope that Americans have a greater appreciation of what we have been left by our ancestors, so to speak, the great blessing that we live in a democracy, that we have the Constitution and the rule of law. I'm reminded of something I read that was titled "Two Cheers for Democracy," and it said democracy has its deficiencies, so it's not worth 3 cheers, but it is better than any other form of government that has been tried. So 2 cheers. And I would hope that if in the future we have a greater appreciation for what we have by way of our democracy, it would go on for another 250 years. Benjamin Franklin, after the signing of the Constitution, was asked by a friend, "What kind of government have you given us?" And he replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." And so I would hope that if we have more and better civic education and civic engagement, we would keep it. We would recognize the value of what we have, and it would be sustained over time.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the panelists sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you for being here and taking your time out of your day to be part of this. I also want to thank our sponsors for Iowa Ideas. ITC Midwest is our presenting sponsor, and the Economic Alliance is the sponsor for this particular session. So both of them are based in Cedar Rapids, and thank you very much. It's because of them that people can participate in this for free. Iowa Ideas continues tomorrow. This is our 9th year of Iowa Ideas, where we look at statewide issues and bring in panelists and introduce new ideas for tackling some of the common challenges we face as a state. We're going to end a few minutes early here, but it's the end of the day, and I think that people would probably appreciate that a little bit. So I want to thank everybody here. If you're staying with Iowa Ideas tomorrow, we have a New York Times bestseller from Iowa is giving the keynote address in the morning, and the afternoon keynote address is coming from the founder of the Big Grove Brewery in Solon and a partner in Big Grove Breweries in Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. So you're going to want to listen to those as well. I hope people caught Iowa's first family of football, Kirk and Mary Ferentz, this morning, having our opening keynote address. So stay with us tomorrow. And until then, thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.